It's that time of the week for the Peacock and Williamson mailbag. We got questions on Aaron Rodgers and his now non-return in 2023. What that means moving forward into 2024 for the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers, and the most exciting playoff matchups and a whole lot more coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Appreciate all of the everydayers out there. Subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we got multiple questions here about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets and what this means going forward. Now that we know that Aaron Rodgers is not going to be coming back, and he admitted that it's really funny the timing of this, how this all goes down. It's like Aaron Rodgers might come back. Oh, Jets are eliminated for the 13th straight year from the playoffs, and Aaron Rodgers like, it's really like 4 weeks away from being able to be cleared to practice anyway. Like what? That was next week. So Aaron Rodgers, he's done. He's not coming back in 2023, and he shouldn't. And he'll be back though with the Jets, it looks like, in 2024. He also, Matt, said that, whatever he said, I'm pretty good at recruiting. So whatever the Jets need me to do in 2024 to improve the roster, I'm in to help do that. And when you look at the Jets 2024, once Rodgers went down, everything else that came along with Rodgers was not only not helpful, but potentially detrimental with Hackett, with the offensive coordinator. There was big time problems with Alan Lazard and
Randall Cobb.
Yeah. I mean, sure, help recruit, but I don't know if we want the guys you want next year.
Kind of reminds me of Belichick. Like, you're a Hall of Famer, you're an all-time great, but stay in your lane and coach the team and play the quarterback. We'll do the GMing. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need all your buddies that are overpriced and old and just because you trust them. If it's Devontae Adams, I mean, I'm a little more ears are open on something like that, but Lazards and Cobbs of the world, no.
That's interesting though. It went so bad in Las Vegas that now you can get you probably get Devontae back at a pretty bargain price.
Like 85 cents on the dollar or something like that. Yeah. I mean, especially if they're totally rebuilding. Yeah. I think
I'll sure take a Devontae Adams over Lazard plus Randall Cobb plus whatever else there.
Dalvin Cook, because he played against them in the NFC North or whatever. I mean, all these old dudes. I
mean, if you consider that wide receiver tandem too of Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers healthy at quarterback, even
Breece Hall,
Aaron Rodgers.
Now you're talking.
But you know what they need to do instead of spending that first rounder on another wide receiver is spend it on the offensive line. So I think they had the worst offensive line in the NFL this year.
100%. And they also got hit by injuries, but they were light to begin with, and they won't have a second because of the Rodgers trade. So there's only one pick in the top, 70 or whatever that they can use. So that's not great. I mean, and then cap situation, they have some big money guys like Becton are even up on the O-line. They're an interesting team. I mean, I know that we were asked about, who could be on the hot seat. Do you think the Jets staff and front office is safe? I mean, I know Rodgers is safe, and back in the original conversation, it doesn't shock me one bit that all of a sudden he's not ready to come back, because why on earth would you? But do you think their staff is safe?
Part of all this. And we've been asked that question too about Robert Saleh, so we can kind of transition into that part of it. We'll talk about Arthur Smith in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But as for Robert Saleh, to be honest with you, I don't think you could point at anybody necessarily to blame for how this all went down. And I would blame Joe Douglas more than I would blame Robert Saleh. So Robert Saleh might end up being the fall guy here, but he's a defensive-minded head coach. The defense was not the problem.
No.
Robert Saleh is not the one that wanted to bring in Nathaniel Hackett, right? He brought in a different coordinator from the Shanahan tree in in Matt LaFleur's little brother, Mike LaFleur, who I think would have looked like a lot better coordinator than Hackett was this year once Rodgers went down. And so when you look at where the team failed, it was more personnel than coaching as far as Robert Saleh and the defense goes. And Robert Saleh is going to take the fall when it wasn't his own guys that he failed with. So I would have a big problem if Saleh got fired there. And but I don't necessarily think that GM Joe Douglas should get fired, because I can see why they went down that path. I would point to, okay, backup quarterback. What was the contingency plan? It was bad. And you're still paying for the whole Zach Wilson thing that was also not on Robert Saleh. Right. So, although he was part of that he was brought in that year, I think you fire nobody. And then next year you start cleaning big time house if it doesn't work.
It seems like, I mean, this is just a total hunch, that Saleh's seat is hotter than Douglas's. And I do think Douglas has done a lot of good team building before Aaron Rodgers' name ever got mentioned with the Jets. I think he's done some good things in the last few off seasons before this. But the Rodgers thing had to come from the top. I mean, I'm sure Robert Saleh had the third at most heaviest voice in the Rodgers situation. You know what I mean? He's not standing on the table for his guy. They're telling him, yeah, we're going to get Rodgers. You like it? Yeah, sure. I'm in. Okay. Give me a shot.
And Robert Saleh wasn't like, oh, hey, you know what we should do is fire our current offensive coordinator and go hire Nathaniel Hackett. That wasn't his idea.
Probably not. I mean, I'm sure all these decisions were made for him, whether he liked it or not. Maybe he did like it. I mean,
I'm sure he voted. It's like, raise your hand if you want Aaron Rodgers. He probably raised his hand up, right?
Yeah. Looked around the room and everybody had their hands up, and yeah, I'm in. I do think it's a little harsh, though. Well, Flacco was available, and maybe you should have grabbed him, week 2, week 1 after the Rodgers situation. And there's some hindsight there, considering how well he's played.
Well, that's where Wilson
wasn't going anywhere, though. Yeah. I mean, you just drafted him 2nd overall. You're not going to flip him for a 1st-round pick. I mean, he's going to be there.
The 49ers flipped Trey Lance for a 4th. Like they didn't worry about what the return was. They had a different quarterback. They decided on a different guy. And so maybe the Jets should have gone that route and been like, look, let's get a backup, and Zach's not it. Let him try somewhere else. Or even with Zach Wilson, he could be 3rd, right? He could,
after the injury.
You lost a quarterback, replaced with a quarterback. I mean, it's GMing 101. That's why I point to Joe Douglas more, and I would blame him more, and I don't think he's on the hot seat, is more than anything, quarterback screwed you up this year, and you did nothing. So that's on you.
I also think it's a little bit of a cop-out just to say everyone's hands are clean because Rodgers got hurt on the 4th snap of the game. Like Cincinnati's doing all right with Browning. It doesn't mean you have to be horrible.
There was a ton of teams that are doing okay with a non-Hall of Fame quarterback this year.
Right. I mean, with plan B or whatever. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be horrible on offense.
Arthur Smith, that is the next conversation. Is he on the hot seat? What do the Atlanta Falcons do this offseason? If they keep him, if they don't keep him, is it the same plan no matter if Arthur Smith comes back or not in 2024? And what are some of the most exciting playoff matchups coming up in especially that wild card round next? Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. And not only is it easy, but PrizePicks is so much fun. It's just you against the numbers. You're not battling thousands of other players. You're not battling pros. There's no sharks in the pool. It's just you versus the numbers. It's just you versus those PrizePicks projections. You pick more or less than the projections on 2 to 6 players and those stat projections at PrizePicks, and then you watch the winnings roll in. You could win up to 25 times your money playing fantasy football this season. The more you pick, the more you win. You turn $10 into $250 at PrizePicks. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL to get started, and you will get a 100% deposit match as well using our promo code LockedOnNFL. There's also a reboot policy that PrizePicks has that nobody else in the industry has. If one of your players gets hurt in the first half of a football game or basketball game, doesn't return in the second half, that player is rebooted. So play with confidence, 2 to 6 players, more or less than their stats, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100 PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Arthur Smith now. So I think, did we both agree that Robert Saleh is probably on the warm seat but should not be fired?
Yeah, I think you do one more year with Rodgers. I mean,
Yes.
He's coming back. Why shuffle the deck too much? And if that's a disaster, then reconsider it after 1 year.
Yeah, and it might be a new GM and head coach situation and new quarterback. It's all of the above potentially in 2025 if things don't
put all your chips in one last run,
It'll be amazing if you get good quarterback play, how much better of a head coach Robert Saleh will look. Because all of a sudden that defense is still playing well, and now you're getting offensive production. You're like, oh, okay, now things are pretty good.
Now it's all right, yeah.
Let's go to was it Paul? I believe yes. Paul on Twitter says, "How hot is Arthur Smith's seat? Isn't the Carolina loss an indictment of the Smith regime? How could Bijan be underutilized so much in a must-win game? Should Falcons trade for Justin Fields in the offseason?"
I thought the seat was lukewarm, a week or two ago. I think it's warming up quickly. I mean, what a bad resume builder to lose in Carolina and not use your guys. He seems like a different type of dude. I mean, his dad founded FedEx. I mean, he didn't grow up like most coaches or most human beings on the planet, obviously. I mean, I was watching like the Titans that built America, and his dad's featured on there. I mean, it's pretty crazy. With that being said, it doesn't mean he's a good guy, bad guy, good coach, bad coach. I mean, that's just a different background. But I do know, speaking of tycoons, they don't get there by accident, and they like when they invest in something for it to pay off. If I'm going to invest in Home Depot or FedEx or whatever, I want it to pay off. If I'm going to invest in Bijan, London, and Pitts, I want to see return on my investment. So why aren't we using these guys? I mean, meanwhile, the story that no one's talking about is the defense actually got way better. And one other thing I would throw out there, and I'm going to lump Washington with Atlanta, and a lot of us were critical of their quarterback choices this offseason, their quarterback path. But looking back on it, shouldn't we have just destroyed the Commanders and Falcons for saying our best plan is using a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick as our starter, with the only competition being Heineke and Brissett, and basically, even if Brissett looks better in camp, we're going to give the job to Howe anyway. That sounds ludicrous right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those. For me, this one's the opposite of the Jets thing. Arthur Smith, to me, should be on the hottest seat there is. Like it should be that he's gone. I've seen enough. I would not bring Arthur Smith back. And to be honest with you, Arthur Smith came from Tennessee, right, as the offensive coordinator.
Right.
Was that offense like, I got to have that offense? Okay, you handed it to
Derrick Henry a lot and
Tannehill. Times. Like what did Arthur Smith do is so amazing with the Tennessee Titans offense, right? So, I am not in at all on Arthur Smith's offense. I don't care who the quarterback is. So it's new quarterback, new coach for me in 2024 with the Atlanta Falcons. And as for the Justin Fields part of it, I love that fit for the Falcons, whether it's Arthur Smith or not. And they kind of, are in that realm of, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would have this in this conversation. Those are two good teams I would love to see Justin Fields end up with, because it's not going to cost you a 1st-round pick. And your 1st-round pick is a little bit too late to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. So you can still build around your team, build around that quarterback. And there's still some weapons for a quarterback of Justin Fields' talent to come in and compete and potentially go win a job. And you still have a quarterback that you can, quote unquote, compete with Justin Fields with. And so I think those types of teams are a perfect fit for someone like Justin Fields. And so, and I think Fields would fit nicely with what Arthur Smith's offense is. I just wouldn't want Arthur Smith around. And for Justin Fields' sake, I hope he gets a better group of receivers and a better offensive coordinator the second time around.
So I heard this on another podcast, so I might be a number or two off. But you mentioned Derrick Henry. You talked about the style of offense he brings with him from Tennessee to Atlanta. And last year, without Bijan, they ran the ball really well. Cordero Patterson, Algier, and a lot of us thought, boy, if Algier's getting 4.6 a carry, Bijan will get 5.1, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
And so we can all agree they were one of the best running teams in the league last year, right? So if I were to ask you, and I would have got this very wrong, Where do you think they rank in rushing EPA this year with Bijan?
I would have thought they would be better at least above the median.
They're not. They're like 28th. That's unacceptable to me. I mean, I know they've had a little bit of O-line injuries here and there, but you have a running quarterback, the 8th pick in the draft, and we're already a foundationally good running game, and that went from like 3rd in the league to 28th from last year. That's unacceptable.
Plus the 8th pick in the draft the year before on offense, plus the 4th pick in the year the year before on offense, and none of them are eating. So are they? Is it possible that everyone's bad, or is maybe one person not great, and that's the guy who's in charge of the offense and the head coach and Arthur Smith? So yeah, to me that's an easy one, and I would fire Smith. And I don't want to put it that way. I don't like calling for people's jobs. These are human beings out there, but this is the NFL, and I think the results speak that. I would be looking elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, if he redeems himself and wins the division, that's a different story, but it doesn't look like he probably will. I just want to double check this because in a game that ended up 9-7, you got Bijan 7 carries, Algier had 14, Patterson 5, Ritter 5. That's unacceptable. And Bijan had 3 targets, catching 1 for 3 yards. But just as bad, Drake London only had 3 targets. Like, I think we can argue, is Kyle Pitts a really, really big asset or not? Maybe he's a bust. Maybe he's just okay. He's not special. London's a great receiver. I'm not sure everybody realized that. He's a great receiver, and you threw him the ball 3 times.
Nothing. And look, there's also he's getting credit for being in a playoff race that they shouldn't be in just because they're in a bad division, right? We'd be talking about the Falcons like we talk about, say, the Raiders or other teams that have already fired their coaches if they were in the AFC or even in a different division in the NFC. But since they're in the NFC South, they're 2 games under 500, and they're like, they could go win the division still. He shouldn't get credit for how bad the rest of the teams are also in the division.
Right. Oh, you won the division. Well, you still only won 8 games. And I just wanted to double check this too. Yep. They have had the easiest strength of schedule of any team in the league thus far. I mean, you got to be better than that.
Yeah, got to be. You have to be better. It's a results-based business.
Yep.
Rookie wide receivers, Matt. How would you rank them, knowing what we know now? The question comes from JDS. Knowing now a little bit, if we were to redraft that 2023 rookie receiver class, what order would they go in?
So this is obviously a major overlap with Locked On Dynasty. We talk about this stuff all the time, rookie classes, all those things. So I just wanted to pull it up, make sure I didn't miss out. The guy you can't forget about is Puka Nacua. He was the 177th pick in the draft. And I think you could argue, do you want Nacua or Dell? Do you want Addison, Flowers, Smith and Najigba, or those guys? I mean, I can't put Rashee Rice in that conversation yet. I love Jaden Reed, but he would not be my first 3 or 4.
If you said, you can have the first rounders or the field, I would take the field for sure.
Agreed, because of Nacua in particular. But I'm with you there. Dell, Rashee Rice, Reed.
I think I would rank Nacua and maybe even Reed, probably not Reed, but Nacua over Dell because we've seen now a full season of Nacua taking hits and Dell
blocking and everything
to stand up to the hits. And obviously it wasn't a hit where he was tackled. It was he's in the trees and you question why he's in there in a dense split. But that's kind of the thing. If he's a wide receiver that's so unique, you can't even line him up like you would want to line up your other wide receivers, then I think he would, as awesome as he looked. And then you have to look at the offense and how good everyone's looked. And all the receivers have played up too in that offense this year in Houston with CJ Stroud too. So I would go Nacua, and it would be tough to argue even one of the first rounders over Nacua, although, Smith and Jigba's kind of shown some signs, made the big play, obviously, on Monday Night Football, and Zay Flowers. Probably one.
The other name I'd throw out there that's not in consideration for number one, just wanted to mention those, Josh Downs. I'm a Josh Downs believer. But in terms of in dynasty value, Nacua goes first. If you have a startup right now, Nacua goes ahead of all these guys, which I totally understand. Smith and Jigba was my favorite coming out. And if it was my favorite team, hey, you're GM of a team right now, Matt. You get to pluck any rookie receiver and throw them on your football team, not fantasy. I would still go JSN, but Nacua would be a close second. Flowers is probably third. Flowers versus Dell is tough for me.
I wouldn't fight you on that. I go Flowers over Dell, and then Dell 4, and then
maybe Addison 5.
Then it would be, who's that?
Addison.
Oh, Addison. Yeah, Addison. I knew there was the one I was forgetting there. Those 3 first rounders in a row. Yeah, Addison. Addison.
I don't love Addison. I get a lot of heat on Locked On Dynasty for not liking Addison.
You're a Pitt guy and you don't like Addison. Come on, man.
Well, he left. He left us hanging, man.
One more honorable mention who probably wouldn't be up with those guys, but he's just not too far behind is the Packers. What a great job they've done with those non-first round receivers. Dontavian Wicks, the 5th rounder this year, has looked really good for those Packers, and I think might be there. I mean, it's Reed in the slot. I think Wicks. I think Wicks is ahead of Dobbs now. Romeo Dobbs in that discussion for the Packers, and then you got Christian Watson on the other side. So a good class of rookie wide receivers throughout the draft. There's some guys later too showing up, the A.T. Perrys of the world, and
Demario Douglas.
Yeah, so
that's a good one. Yeah, I kind of liked Michael Wilson too. He's been banged up, but he's good a little bit.
He's a starter from day one, basically, with the Arizona Cardinals this year, because of what their roster was looking like. So,
kind of an incomplete grade on Marvin Mims and Cedric Tillman too. But maybe next year they show us that they're worth it.
Next,
I'd still take JSN. But
it's a lot closer now. There's a really close group, and especially how JSN operates is what Nacua does, even that far off of what you would expect for peak JSN anyway. That would be great over all of them.
Yeah, neither one's outside the numbers. AJ Green, prototypical. Yes.
Next, how about those playoff matchups? What are we looking forward to as we're starting to see what some of these playoff matchups could look like in January? Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when it's time to buy tickets, right? You're excited. I'm going to a game. I'm going to the ball game. I'm going to see this band. I'm going to see this comedy show. I'm going to the theater event. I'm taking my family to the theater. Whenever you're buying your next big event, try Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, theater events near you. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And one of my biggest pet peeves in buying tickets, and I'm sure for a lot of folks, is the fees associated with it, especially when you don't know the fees are there until you're about to check out. It's like, hey, I got this great deal on tickets. Nope, you didn't, because guess what? Here's all these hidden fees. All-in prices at Gametime show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without those hidden fees. You buy those tickets in a couple of taps. They're right there on the app. You don't have to fish through your email when you get to your event, and you could even buy tickets to the event, not even right up to the start of the event, but even an hour after it starts. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, playoff matchups time, Matt. Looking ahead at what could be, especially if things kind of stay close to where they're at right now with the 1 seeds in the NFC and the AFC. We got a question here from, and now I lost where the question was. Is this one from Dave? Yes, Dave. Which set of wild card teams do you think would make the most exciting playoff matchups? I think the Rams, Packers, Texans, Bengals, maybe Seahawks over Packers now, though, would be Dave's favorites. How do you like this as far as matchups go in the wild card round?
The two that stand out to me, not necessarily who they play, but just making the playoffs more exciting, more watchable, more enjoyable, is easily the Bills in the AFC. And I would also say the Rams in the NFC. I mean, I think those are playoff caliber teams that could upset a home team, or in Buffalo's case, maybe even go to the dance. I mean, those to me would definitely make things more enjoyable. Seattle versus Green Bay for the other spot is interesting to me as well. I would have said Green Bay a couple weeks ago. I'm leaning more towards Seattle now. Green Bay's D is just rough.
With the way that some of the teams are playing in the NFC right now, and like would the Rams like knocking off the 2 seed Eagles or Cowboys? Would that be like the big upset of round
Could
1?
happen.
And then the Rams, kind of run out of gas the next week, the divisional round, and then get blown out or something like that. That's something to be fun just to see Matthew Stafford sling it and say, all right, let's go. Let's see if we can knock off one of these teams. And so that would be a fun one. And probably, the opposite of that is in the AFC where nobody wants to face the Bills, but everyone's like, please don't get the 7 seed Buffalo Bills if you're the 2 seed.
Yeah. I mean, they might be favored in the wild card round in Miami, possibly, or whoever the South winner is in Jacksonville. I would think they're favored. And hey, I like their chances in Kansas City too.
Should be some really good ones. We'll see who actually gets in. It'll be a lot of fun.
One wild card that I've grown fonder of after they just whipped the Steelers are the Colts. I mean, I don't know if the Colts are great or not, but they're fun. They have a lot of big plays. They score on defense. Minshew throws it all over the place. The Colts are kind of a fun watch.
Quick question here from Shano. Why are scouts and others so reluctant to admit they're wrong when admitting to getting it wrong with someone like Brock Purdy, but are so eager to say they are wrong when it's a bust like Zach Wilson? Is it because it's a round 1 bust, it's team coach's fault, but the late round pick is on scouting and not blamed on the coaching?
So is he saying people are quick to say Purdy they were wrong on, or they're too quick on the first rounders? I wasn't quite sure.
He's saying they're more eager to admit
when they miss on a bad guy or a late guy.
No, it's the opposite. They weren't wrong on Brock. The scouting wasn't wrong. He's just getting great coaching. And,
I see what you're saying.
And Zach's being ruined. It's not the scouting, it's the coaching that's ruining him. So the scouting was never wrong. It's all about the where they ended up, which was the thing. So like the evaluations, people want to stick to their evaluations. They're trying to find ways to explain why Brock is so good and explain why Zach is so bad, is what he's saying.
I mean, I think most of it's just human nature. I mean, obviously that, you invest more in somebody higher. Even if you're a Kuiper, McShay, draft Nick guy, everybody had Zach Miller in the first, or Zach Wilson in the first round. Maybe you wouldn't take them second overall. Maybe you'd have liked the quarterback ahead of him, but it would have been a shock if he falls out of the first round. So everybody had a high grade on him to some degree. I don't know how to answer that. I mean, because there's so many reasons a player can quote bust, and especially a quarterback. I've been saying this more and more as I get older. I almost care more about the landing spot than the player. And this isn't a Purdy thing necessarily, but like when a team and when Haskins went to Washington, it's like, oh, best of luck, dude. Or Bryce Young now with Carolina. I don't know if he's good or bad. I mean, he hasn't played well, but I don't know that he's good or bad. But boy, he's got a tougher climb than a lot of guys do.
Yeah, like if Brock Purdy would have been on the Jets roster a couple years ago, he'd probably not look as good as he's looked on the 49ers. Or
right.
If he was on the the initial Bears, rebuilding rosters, that was a tough situation. And so I think that's why a lot of people want to see Justin Fields maybe elsewhere to see what that could potentially look like. And now with a better roster, Zach Wilson still hasn't looked great. So I think most people kind of agree. It's like, well, he was a trick shot artist in college, and it just wasn't a complete product as an NFL prospect coming out, and you kind of learn about things. And one of the things that's so difficult, and I think really what we see is most people are pretty willing. As soon as a player gets drafted, you see a bad game, like, well, he sucks. Let's move on to the next one.
You can't have that, personal experience, but it's real life experience is, I was with the Browns for that 1 year, and there were people on staff that were part of the Browns when they came back into the league. And if you remember, the NFL did not give the Browns nearly the resources of like the Jags or the Panthers. Like they were horrendous right off the bat. Then they didn't get much given to them. And if you talk to people on that staff, every one of them said the same thing about Tim Couch, that they said, we did not make the wrong pick in Tim Couch. He was a phenomenal prospect that had no chance to succeed. That happens. I mean, it just happens.
Like David Carr getting
I don't know if David Carr was good or not. I know that they think Couch was phenomenal and was not the problem. You know,
yeah, like the David Carr getting, if you get sacked more than anyone's ever been sacked in your rookie season, probably that's detrimental to your development. I don't know what David Carr would have become, but not a great way to start.
100%, 100%. You know, right. So, I mean, there is a lot of that. And sometimes it's Jamarcus Russell when he just comes to the league and doesn't work hard and doesn't care and whatever. I mean, and it's on him.
Yeah, some of the things are really easy to point to. Yeah, if they don't care, they're not working hard, they're not going to work out no matter how talented they are. If they get injured and break their legs and can't move anymore, break their arm, can't throw anymore, that's going to ruin your career. So there's a lot of ways it can go bad. And but even players that you thought were in a great situation like Mac Jones and looked okay as a rookie,
right.
That was one of the rarest ones I've ever seen. You go to a Hall of Fame coach, what seemed like a great situation, you look good as a rookie, which is the hardest part. And then it becomes a disaster and goes straight downhill from there. That's a wild one.
Yeah, usually I thought this was true with Mac Jones, that he was at least over the hump of he'll be a starter.
NFL starter.
Yeah. You know, after his rookie year, I'm like, I don't love him, but he'll be an NFL starter.
Thanks for all the questions, everybody. Appreciate you dropping them on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or in the YouTube comments. And Matt and I, of course, will be back as we do every week. Start making picks for week 16 now. Christmas games. 6-pack coming at you tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.